Our planet is facing unprecedented environmental threats that will have consequences for us and future generations. These threats are global, transcending political borders. The science is clear. Together, we have a responsibility to follow the facts. Together, we have a responsibility to do our fair share to find global solutions to our planetary crisis. At the United Nations Environment Programme, our vision is to help people and countries to thrive while living in harmony with nature. We believe it is possible. Our mission is to inform, enable, and inspire people and countries to act, and act decisively to reverse the effects of climate change, to strengthen biodiversity, and to limit the impact of pollution on our wild spaces, our oceans, and our cities. UNEP identifies and addresses the root causes of environmental challenges. In short, we need to move towards sustainable
segment is being held online. I am addressing you presently from one of our green spaces, urban forest, located in the center of the Nairobi city, our capital city. These green spaces have helped our people, our communities, providing them with a conducive environment to relate, to relax with their families during the lockdowns as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This session is going to be online, and we'll be discussing largely administrative and budgetary issues. There will also be an online session of Ministers for Environment to discuss topical issues. The substantive agenda would hopefully, God willing, be held next year, February, in person. I hope and pray that that happens. Let me once again invite you and say how pleased we are to have you participate with us, and very much look forward to fruitful deliberations. Karibuni sana.
We are meeting in unprecedented times. Together with the world, we have adapted to a new way of doing things. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has required us to embrace this technological medium to convene this session of the Assembly. We should be proud that we are able to meet today. 151 member states are registered and connected online. It proves how seriously and important we consider the environment to be. In 2022, it will be 50 years since the creation of the United Nations Environment Programme. This meeting will also represent the start of celebrating UNEP at 50, an opportunity to look back with pride at what has been achieved as inspiration to the global environmental agenda for the future. Because these are indeed sobering times, getting back on our feet after that pandemic is a real challenge that we all face. Getting back on track to fulfill the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, especially for the poorest and most vulnerable, is imperative. We will not succeed unless we truly transform our relationship with our planet. So I believe that we must increase our impact at a higher scale than we are currently operating. Can we identify actions which can help us address climate change and protect biodiversity or reduce pollution at the same time? Identifying such co-benefits would allow us to increase the impact of our actions. We are in this together, and we must respond together, each doing our part. The United Nations is built on hope and solidarity, and this is no less true for UNEA. I trust that this online Environment Assembly will also motivate and inspire real action. Now, let us start. But first, I wish to acknowledge the months of hard work and cooperation by my colleagues in the Bureau of the Assembly and the Committee of Permanent Representatives in preparing for this session. It is truly appreciated. I would also like to thank the Secretariat for your unwavering and strong support under the leadership of Executive Director Ms. Inger Anderson. All your efforts exemplify the spirit of the United Nations. I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Inger Anderson, Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme, to deliver her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Minister Rotevatn, and indeed to all excellencies, honorable ministers, Observers, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good morning, good afternoon. We are, as we just heard, meeting at a time of great upheaval. Over 1 year on, we are still feeling the full impacts of the pandemic. And as a result, we are unable to greet each other in person at this, the 5th gathering of UNEA. COVID-19 pandemic is inextricably linked to the 3 planetary crises of our own making: the climate crisis, the nature crisis, and the pollution and waste crisis. I do not need to go into detail about these crises. You know all about them. And they were detailed in UNEP's Making Peace with Nature report launched last week by the Secretary General, a report that provides a comprehensive breakdown of the immediate peril facing the planet, a report which also provides the scientific underpinning for the new UNEP medium-term strategy. Indeed, this report has received unprecedented coverage. More than 1,000 news stories in 74 countries have been published thus far, with stories appearing in 22 languages, including, of course, all the 6 UN languages. Excellencies, colleagues, as tomorrow's UNEA at 50 kickoff shows, we have spent half a century working to achieve and slow these crises, and we have achieved much. We now fully understand the causes of and solutions to the crisis. We have acted through many multilateral agreements, from healing the ozone layer, to slowing the growth of emissions, to increasing actions on biodiversity. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution are now issues that voters, markets, and businesses practice. But we have to acknowledge that the situation is worsening, that doing more of the same, therefore, and doing it at the same speed as that we have employed up until now, will not bring about the pace of change that is needed. We have to acknowledge that the time for our movement is now to change drastically. We have to acknowledge that we need an all of society effort with the planet, and therefore to create environmental conditions so that all of humanity can thrive now and for generations to come. So UNEA-5 must drive this radical change to an era of action. By agreeing to hold UNEA virtually, you have already demonstrated its relevance. This assembly is the world's top environmental body. It sits at the core of the Rio+20 architecture, uniting all of environmental agendas. It is about deciding where we go and how fast we go there. Most importantly, it is about lives. Most of us at this meeting have seen our jobs and health hold up during the pandemic, but others have not been so lucky. We have a duty of care to everyone who's lost their jobs, their health, their family members, their lands, their future. If we do not get on top of the 3 planetary crises, and quickly, the planet will warm, nature will wither, many more will suffer. Over the last year, you have supported UNEP by increasing our income to the core fund. I thank you deeply for this vote of confidence. And I now ask you in this first UNEA session to approve the medium-term strategy, the program of work and budget, so we can work harder, faster, and stronger. And then take the vision of UNEA out into the world in this critical year. I know everyone has tried hard, worked hard, done your jobs, fought for the environment. I now ask you to do more, because it's time to move from banging the drum to banging doors, because the environmental crisis that humanity is facing cannot be addressed in the manners of modes of yesterday, because the challenge is of existential proportion, because time is no longer on our side and action must be now, because failure is simply not an option. We must make businesses, investors, and your very own colleagues in other ministries commit to turning 2021 into the year in which we began making peace with nature. That means backing a green recovery from the pandemic. That means joining the Net Zero Club and submitting stronger nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. That means agreeing an ambitious biodiversity framework backed by the means of implementation. That means mobilizing whole of government, economy, and society. That means deploying rapid efforts to renew nature through the decade of ecosystem restoration. That means adopting a new chemicals management framework and redoubling progress on plastic pollution. And that means stepping up action to ensure planetary, human, and animal health through One Health Alliance. We need these meaningful commitments and the accompanying action on the ground together with global solidarity so that we can build on them at the resumed session UNEA-5 in 2022. So colleagues, the world is watching, not least the next generation. The Youth Assembly took place last week, and they call for your leadership, your commitment, your action, and your courage. Yes, this is a time of great upheaval, but it is in upheaval that humanity excels. It is when humanity is faced with the gravest challenge that we must lift our heads from the daily grind and find better ways of being, so that we can make peace with nature, so that we can conquer poverty, so that we can deliver justice. I call on you, who make up the United Nations Environment Assembly, to rise to this existential challenge. Let it be said that when the world convened at the highest environmental authority, that the world's environment ministers rose to that challenge, that they were able to see past divisions and rather look to the horizon with a steely determination to mend an ailing planet and be that driving force that leads us to a just, peaceful, and sustainable future. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, on behalf of the Bureau and myself personally, thank you for your leadership and thank you for your support. I now have the particular pleasure to invite representatives of the Children and Youth Major Group to address the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly. Ms. Hera Ali and Mr. Guaibin Huang, representatives of the Children and Youth Major Group, you have the floor.
Dear Hera, kindly take the floor.
Distinguished delegates, excellencies, thank you
for purpose. They have failed to account for the intangible value of nature, and conventional analyses of economic development do not take into account the loss to future generations that will be caused by climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Children and youth call on member states to include the value of nature in economic analyses and incorporate it as a key policy lever when you make decisions that concern us. At the same time, we ask UNEP to incorporate these analyses in their communications. Economic stakeholders often listen to the dismal science more than they do climate physics. Minister Devatin, this is an opportunity for UNEP to change the narrative. I urge you not to let it go. The second message is that advanced science policy processes are essential to meeting our climate targets. In the MTS, UNEP has committed itself to serving as a knowledge broker that builds consensus around existing and emerging environmental issues. The launch of the Global Environmental Outlook 6 for Youth report last week at the Youth Environmental Assembly is an encouraging step towards an inclusive science policy interface. During your discussions today and tomorrow, we are calling on you, member states, to establish a trust fund on youth engagement to be administered together with the youth constituency, and in so doing, make means of implementation a reality. Nothing about us without us. This assembly is being held under exceptional circumstances, but the future of our planet cannot wait. The Children and Youth Major Group calls on member states to fulfill your commitment to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wang, and thank you, Ms. Ali. These remarks were certainly heard. You have reminded us of the importance of our task, and at least speaking for myself, I hear you. Next, I am honored to introduce a video address from Mr. Volkan Bozkır, President of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly.
Excellencies, thank you for the opportunity to address the 5th UN Environment Assembly, the preeminent forum for multilateral action on environmental issues. I extend my sincere appreciation to the government of Kenya for hosting the assembly, even if virtually, and for serving as the hub of UN environment. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may be candid, the tragic irony is that this scaled-down assembly is directly linked to humanity's continued encroachment on the natural world. While we will hopefully emerge from the pandemic sooner than later, there is no certainty that we will not face further such crises in the years to come. The next zoonotic disease, with the ability to spread across borders, may be just around the corner, and the warnings are all around us. At our current level of use and exploitation, we would require 1.6 Earths to maintain current living standards. Extinction rates are around 100 to 1,000 times higher than the baseline rate and are increasing. Average temperature has risen 1.18 degrees Celsius, with 2016 and 2020 tied as the warmest years on record. And land degradation has reached 24% per year. 12 million hectares of land, an area the size of Benin, are lost. We have a fundamental and existential choice to make. Continue down our current path, which involves pressing demands on a planet whose capacity cannot meet our needs as is, or we adjust our behaviors, however inconvenient that may be, to find some sort of harmony and balance with the world around us. And this is very much the time to act.
and ecosystems collapse as one of the top 5 threats humanity will face in the coming 10 years. The urgency for action has never been clearer. This meeting needs to generate a global will for action, a transformation of our relationship with nature. By the climate COP in Glasgow, at the latest, we need all countries to come forward with more ambitious nationally determined contribution with 2030 targets that are consistent with carbon neutrality by 2050. By the Biodiversity COP in Kunming, nations must show how they will reverse species and ecosystem loss with concrete targets and means of implementation. We must also ensure a strong post-2020 framework for the sound management of chemicals and waste. That means preventing harmful chemicals and waste from entering the environment and adopting effective, safe alternatives that safeguard the health of people and the environment. And we must work to prevent the decline of our oceans. That includes ending unsustainable fishing practices, expanding marine protected areas, and drastically reducing maritime pollution, including plastic. Our action to protect the ozone layer has shown that when all stakeholders are aligned, action can succeed. It should be an inspiration and guide for all our efforts to protect the global environment. But we all know that words are not enough. Commitments must be underpinned by clear and credible plans. So I cannot overstate the importance of your deliberations. I know that these meetings virtually are not easy to have. In preparation for COP26 in Glasgow and other intergovernmental processes, I have directed UN officials around the world to have offices and venues available so all countries can participate in virtual negotiations. We will support you in every way possible. To a large degree, the viability of humanity on this planet depends on your efforts. With leadership, determination, and commitment to future generations, I'm convinced we can provide a healthy planet for all humanity to not just survive, but to thrive. I wish you a productive meeting, and I thank you.
Thank you all for your attention, and to Mr. Guterres for his message and support of our mandate and goals as the UN Environment Assembly and of the UN Environment Programme. We are now truly reminded how critical our responsibility is. This online meeting must mark a commitment on our side to roll up our sleeves again. We must take the action needed to build a strong and resilient post-pandemic world which delivers a sustainable future for all. I now invite you to turn your attention to agenda item number 2, which is adoption of the agenda and organization of work. As contained in document UNEP-EA5-1-Rev1, entitled Provisional Agenda for the 5th session of the Assembly. May I invite the Assembly to adopt its provisional agenda? I see no objections. I declare the agenda adopted. I now wish to invite you to turn your attention to the organization of work as presented in the annotated agenda UNEP-EA5-1-Rev1-Add1. Organization of work. Taking into account the exceptional circumstances associated with the coronavirus pandemic, this online session of the Environment Assembly will undertake an initial consideration of agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 15 of the agenda, and thereafter, during the resumed in-person meeting expected to be held in February 2022, the Assembly shall conclude the consideration of the remaining items on the agenda. We will now hear statements from the regional and political groups. Given the time constraint, I urge the representatives speaking on behalf of these groups to please limit their statements to 5 minutes. I wish to call upon His Excellency Mr. Bayan Rossum, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Eritrea and Dean of the African Diplomatic Corps in Nairobi, who will deliver remarks and introduce the Honorable Ms. Barbara Creasy, Rapporteur of the UNEA Bureau, Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries of the Republic of South Africa, and President of the African Ministerial Conference on Environment. Ambassador Rossum, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sir Chairman, the President of the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly, Your Excellencies, dear Executive Director of UNEP, Madam Inger Anderson, the Chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, Ambassador Coimbra, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. We, the African ambassadors and high commissioners here in Nairobi, Kenya, commonly known as the African Group, are very much honored and privileged to have this morning our President of the African Ministerial Conference of the Environment, AMSEN, Her Excellency Barbara Creasy, who is also the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment of South Africa, to deliver a statement on behalf of the Africa Group. Therefore, it is a privilege for me to invite Her Excellency Mrs. Barbara Creasy to give her statement. Madam Minister, thank you.
Distinguished Minister Creasy, kindly unmute your microphone, please. Please proceed. Minister Creasy, if you cannot unmute your microphone, we will give you the floor immediately. So we will cancel this, and please raise your hand to ensure that your connection comes swiftly. Kindly proceed, distinguished Minister.
Are you able to hear me now?
Very well.
Good. Wonderful. Thank you very much. The President of the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly, Your Excellencies, the Executive Director of UNEP, the Chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the African Group. First, allow me to thank and commend you, Your Excellency, Mr. Sveinung Rotevatn, Minister for Climate and Environment of Norway and President of this 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, for your good leadership under the very unusual and challenging circumstances due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Allow me also to take this opportunity to pass my condolences to all of you who, as a result of this pandemic, have lost family, friends, and colleagues. Let me thank the members of the Bureau of the Committee of Permanent Representatives under the leadership of His Excellency Ambassador Fernando Coimbra for the outstanding work in preparing for this first session of UNEA-5. Mr. President, the African Ministers of Environment met virtually on the 4th of December 2020 for the 8th special session of the African Ministers' Conference on the Environment, AMSEN, under the theme Enhancing Environmental Action for Effective Post-COVID-19 Recovery in Africa. During this session, the ministers deliberated on Africa's engagement in and commitment to their active participation for the first part of UNEA-5. The ministers reaffirmed their commitment to continue efforts to conserve, protect, and enhance the resilience of Africa's environment and natural resources as part of their determined efforts in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of the recovery efforts on the continent, AMSEN has adopted the African Green Stimulus Program. This program seeks to address in a sustainable manner the devastating socio-economic and environmental impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and to more importantly harness the opportunities which this approach brings for the continent. It further aims to mobilize additional financial and technical resources to upscale and enhance the implementation of the portfolio of programs within the 12 key priority areas, while identifying areas requiring new interventions to support Africa's green recovery. The program intends to provide an overarching framework which consolidates and coordinates green economy and climate change initiatives on the continent, which have been grouped into 12 areas under one comprehensive umbrella. Mr. President, our group welcomes the UNEP midterm strategy for the period 2022 to 2025, the program of work and budget for the same period, and the related appropriations for the Environment Fund. This has already been articulated by the group's engagement during the recently concluded open-ended meeting of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. The group wishes to emphasize the need for a more coordinated and coherent regional delivery of the program of work. This is also in the context of previous requests by the group on strengthening UNEP's regional presence in Africa. We believe that such strengthening will continue to promote an efficient and effective delivery of UNEP's mandate in the region. Regarding the draft procedural decision on the adjournment and resumption of UNEA-5, the group wishes to reiterate its position that this virtual UNEA session only address procedural issues, and that any substantive matters that need to be addressed by UNEA are done so during the resumed session in 2022. The African group acknowledges the importance of commemorating the 50th anniversary of the establishment of UNEP in Nairobi. The group is ready to work collectively with the president of UNEA-5 and the incoming president of UNEA-6 in the preparations towards a successful commemoration. The group reiterates that such a successful commemoration of the 50th anniversary of UNEP will help reinforce the centrality of UNEP in the global environmental agenda and as the leading global environmental authority. The Africa Group would like to encourage others to refrain from the need to continue to push for online negotiations on substantive matters in global processes due to the ongoing challenges the world is facing. For our continent, the virtual format of negotiations has not proven to be one where there is a level playing field, with some delegations, most notably from Africa, being left behind. the open-ended meeting of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, which has just concluded, demonstrated the technical and connectivity difficulties delegates faced in conducting meetings in the virtual format. The line-by-line consideration of the draft decisions in the contact group proved that even with a significantly scaled-back set of procedural decisions, it was very difficult to forge ahead. Finally, Mr. President, the Africa Group remain ready to engage constructively in the deliberations of this online UNEA-5 and look forward to a possible consensual meeting or statement, look forward to a possible consensual message or statement integrating the key messages highlighted by the ministers as an outcome of this session. I wish once again to express our unequivocal support towards cooperating with all member states, regional groups, and your team in ensuring a successful UNEA and beyond. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I will now invite His Excellency Mr. Saleh bin Suleiman Al Harti, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Sultanate of Oman, who will deliver a statement on behalf of the Asia-Pacific states.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me first to remove this for a while and deliver my statement. معالي السيد رئيس جمعية الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، معالي المديرة التنفيذية لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، معالي الوزراء أصحاب السعادة السفرى والممثلين الدائمين السيدات والسادة، تحية لكم من مجموعة آسيا والمحيط الهادي، ويشرفني أن أقدم الكلمة الإقليمية بالإنابة عن الدول الأعضاء في المنتدى الثالث في سنغافورة. أكدت الدول الأعضاء في مجموعة آسيا والمحيط الهادي على ضرورة اتخاذ إجراءات بشأن حلول مبتكرة متكاملة، السياسات، التمويل، التكنولوجيا، نماذج الأعمال والتغيرات السلوكية، تدعم بيئة مواتية لتحول آسيا والباسيفيك إلى كفاءة الموارد وصديقة للبيئة من خلال أنماط للإنتاج والاستهلاك المستدام. وعلى نفس المنوال، أكد وزراء البيئة من غرب آسيا الذين استضافتهم مملكة البحرين في أغسطس 2020 أن جائحة كوفيد-19 تستدعي وضع وتطبيق سياسات وخطط استراتيجية لإعادة بناء بصورة أفضل لتنمية اقتصادية واجتماعية أكثر ابتكارا وشمولية واخضرارا. وكلا البيانان متلائمان مع موضوع UNEA-5 بتعزيز الإجراءات من أجل الطبيعة لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة في 2020. وحتى الآن شهدنا الوضع المتطور بسرعة مع جائحة كوفيد-19 التي تنشر معاناة البشرية، مؤثرة على الاقتصاد العالمي وقالبة حياة الناس رأسا على عقب. نحن في أمس الحاجة إلى التعاون الدولي والتعددية من أجل إعادة البناء من أجل الأفضل. وقد تقاسمت العديد من الحكومات عبر العالم رؤية أوساكا للمحيطات الزرقاء التي تهدف إلى خفض التلوث الإضافي عن طريق نفايات البلاستيك البحرية إلى الصفر بحلول العام 2050. النظم البيئية السليمة والمتنوعة توفر دفاعا طبيعيا ضد تغير المناخ وتعمل كمغاسل للكربون. في آسيا والمحيط الهادي تهدف اليابان وكوريا الجنوبية إلى معادلة الكربون بحلول العام 2050 والصين بحلول العام 2060. كما أعلنت بوتان، فيجي، جزر المارشال، نيوزيلندا وسنغافورة عن أهدافها لمعادلة الكربون بحلول العام 2050. وأثناء رئاسة السعودية لمجموعة 20 تم إطلاق 3 مبادرات جديدة لتسريع المحافظة على الشعاب المرجانية، إحياء الأراضي والتدوير الاقتصادي للكربون، بينما تدخل البحرين معيارا جديدا للاستصلاح لحماية سواحلها والتأقلم مع ارتفاع مستوى البحر. نعترف بقلق بأن العواصف الرملية والترابية قد أصبحت بسرعة ظاهرة عالمية بتداعيات بيئية اجتماعية واقتصادية سلبية، وفي هذا الخصوص ندعو إلى تطبيق قرار الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة المسمى محاربة العواصف الرملية والترابية، ونطلب من برنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة بأن يقوم بإجراءات منسقة وعاجلة بغية معالجة هذا التحدي الذي يساهم بصورة حاسمة نحو الرفاهية والصحة. في هذا الخصوص يوفر عقد الأمم المتحدة لإصلاح النظم البيئية فرصة هامة للإلهام ودعم الحكومات وأصحاب المصلحة الآخرين يتعاونوا ويطبقوا بنجاح مبادرات الإصلاح حول المنطقة. بالإضافة إلى ذلك نحتاج إلى إطار عمل طموح واقعي ومتوازن للتنوع الحيوي العالمي لما بعد 2020 ليتم تبنيه في الاجتماع ال15 القادم لمؤتمر الأطراف في معاهدة التنوع الحيوي الذي سيعقد في وقت لاحق من هذا العام في قمة بالصين. أخيرا يسرني أن أفيد هذه الجمعية بأن جمهورية كوريا ستستضيف الدورة الرابعة لوزراء وسلطات البيئة لآسيا والباسيفيك في أكتوبر 21، ويخطط غرب آسيا أيضا لعقد منتداه الأول للبيئة نحو في أكتوبر 2021. وكلا المنتديان ستكونان لديهما الفرصة لمناقشة المزيد من الخيارات من أجل إجراءات سريعة ومسارات تحولية بموجب موضوع تعزيز الإجراءات من أجل الطبيعة لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. وسوف يقدمان مدخلات إقليمية للجلسة الثانية لجمعية الأمم المتحدة للبيئة UNEA-5.2 والتي ستعقد في فبراير من العام 2022 في نيروبي. شكرا لكم سيد الرئيس.
Thank you. Next is His Excellency Mr. Martin Gomez Bustillo, who is the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Argentina, who will deliver a statement on behalf of Latin American and Caribbean states. Please, you have the floor.
Good morning. I hope you hear me. Gracias, señor presidente. En nombre del Grupo Regional de América Latina y Caribe, capítulo Nairobi, hacemos llegar nuestro saludo a usted, al presidente del CPR, embajador Coimbra, y la directora ejecutiva Inger Andersen, así como a todos los presentes, reconociendo el trabajo realizado para llegar a esta instancia. La pandemia del COVID-19 constituye un desafío enorme para todo el sistema multilateral de las Naciones Unidas. El PNUMA y sus órganos de gobierno han estado a la altura de las circunstancias, manteniendo la labor y cumpliendo con sus objetivos a pesar de las dificultades. Todos somos conscientes de las limitaciones que la virtualidad representa para la participación de los países en desarrollo en condiciones de igualdad. Sin embargo, hoy estamos celebrando esta sesión de la Asamblea reafirmando nuestro compromiso con el multilateralismo y el desarrollo sostenible, y a la vez confirmando el rol del PNUMA como la principal autoridad ambiental a nivel mundial, pero sin dejar de tener en cuenta que la virtualidad plantea nuevos desequilibrios que estamos llamados a considerar, especialmente las circunstancias de los países en desarrollo. Bajo estas circunstancias cobra especial relevancia el respeto a los objetivos, metas y principios establecidos en los acuerdos ambientales multilaterales y al lenguaje acordado. Señor presidente, el 1 y 2 de febrero pasado se realizó la 22ª reunión del Foro de Ministros de Ambiente de América Latina y el Caribe, donde nuestras autoridades ambientales aprobaron 8 decisiones concretas para impulsar una recuperación sostenible. También adoptaron una declaración ministerial, la declaración de Bridgetown, y un llamado a la acción sobre la dimensión ambiental de la recuperación sostenible del COVID-19. En la declaración de Bridgetown, nuestros ministros señalan que la pandemia puso de manifiesto las desigualdades que existen en nuestros países y entre nuestros países y el mundo. También destacan la importancia del multilateralismo para avanzar hacia el desarrollo sostenible y solución de los problemas mundiales. A su vez, señalan la necesidad de reforzar los vínculos de solidaridad y la cooperación internacional, fortalecer y asegurar la adecuada provisión de medios de implementación para ayudar a los países en desarrollo a hacer frente a la crisis. Nuestros ministros destacan el papel de la Agenda 2030 y de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible como hojas de ruta fundamentales para lograr el desarrollo sostenible en sus dimensiones económica, social y ambiental, reiterando que la erradicación de la pobreza sigue siendo el objetivo central de nuestros esfuerzos. A su vez, reafirma los principios de la Declaración de Río, incluido el principio 7 sobre responsabilidades comunes pero diferenciadas y las capacidades respectivas, así como el rol de la cooperación internacional para contribuir a los esfuerzos nacionales. Señor presidente, la declaración pone énfasis en que las estrategias de recuperación económica y social de la pandemia deben considerar la sostenibilidad en esencia, en sus tres dimensiones, ambiental, social y económica, guiada por un crecimiento del desarrollo inclusivo y resistente y centradas en la aceleración de las medidas ambientales y climáticas. Nuestra región también reconoce la necesidad de continuar trabajando en el fortalecimiento de la gobernanza ambiental y en la aplicación de la legislación ambiental, incluidos los mecanismos de acceso a la información y a la justicia ambiental y a la participación en políticas públicas ambientales. Señor presidente, la declaración de Bridgetown hace un llamado a convertir esta crisis en una oportunidad para integrar de manera urgente y sostenible la dimensión ambiental e incluir una mejor conservación y uso sostenible de los recursos naturales en la planificación del desarrollo económico y social, de conformidad con las circunstancias y prioridades nacionales. En este escenario, la transferencia de tecnología, el desarrollo de capacidad y el acceso a un respaldo financiero adecuado tendrán un rol fundamental. Ante las consecuencias económicas de la pandemia, es fundamental el cumplimiento de los compromisos y obligaciones de aportes de recursos financieros para el apoyo a los países en desarrollo. La declaración destaca la necesidad de implementar mecanismos financieros innovadores para fomentar el desarrollo sostenible, como el pago de servicios ambientales. A su vez, afirma que la recuperación económica de la crisis generada por el COVID-19 debe integrar la dimensión ambiental, sin que el impacto de la pandemia ralentice la capacidad de los gobiernos de asignar recursos para promover el desarrollo sostenible, garantizado el principio de no regresión ambiental. Señor presidente, para culminar, la declaración señala la importancia de que el marco de la reactivación económica se contemple la inclusión social, promoviendo economías bajas en carbono y resilientes, la conservación, el manejo del uso sostenible de los recursos naturales. A su vez, los ministros reconocen que para reducir el riesgo de futuras enfermedades zoonóticas, tanto las presiones inmediatas como las subyacentes de la pérdida de la biodiversidad y de la degradación de los ecosistemas deben abordarse de manera integrada, eficaz, selectiva y sostenida. Asimismo, se subraya que la seguridad alimentaria y nutricional es esencial para fortalecer la capacidad de las sociedades de responder a las enfermedades zoonóticas. La declaración también menciona la relevancia de la cooperación regional, destacando la necesidad de promover el diálogo y el intercambio de información en curso sobre las prácticas óptimas para la gestión de los recursos naturales. Por último, nuestra región desea hacer hincapié en la necesidad de fortalecer al PNUMA en Nairobi. A lo largo de casi 2 años se discutió el proceso de revisión del programa que desafortunadamente no logró aprobarse para esta sesión. Sin embargo, la membresía sí acordó utilizar de mejor manera el periodo intersesional, por lo que esperamos preparar a fondo los temas sustantivos de la segunda sesión durante este periodo. Consideramos importante que esta labor se pueda llevar a cabo de manera presencial, tomando las medidas precautorias pertinentes y que al mismo tiempo se cuente con los medios virtuales que hagan posible la participación de las delegaciones no residentes en Nairobi. El buen uso del periodo intersesional responde a la imperiosa necesidad de lograr una participación de la membresía de forma transparente, incluyente y democrática. Señor presidente, la versión in extenso de esta intervención se remitirá por escrito a la Secretaría. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. I now wish to call upon Her Excellency Mrs. Agrina Musa, High Commissioner and Permanent Representative of Malawi, to deliver a statement on behalf of the Group of 77 in China. You have the floor.
Mr. President, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Group of 77 in China, Nairobi chapter. The group commends the UNEA and CPR Bureau, the Secretariat, and all other stakeholders for the hard work that has gone into organizing this online session of UNEA-5. The group also thanks the Republic of Kenya, the host country, for its continued support for the work of UNEP. Mr. President, the group would also like to congratulate all member states for the cooperation displayed during the 5th OECPR, which adjourned just a few days ago. The group also notes with great appreciation the excellent leadership of the Chair of Committee of Permanent Representatives, CPR, His Excellency Mr. Fernando Coimbra, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Brazil. With the support of the Bureau and of the Secretariat, and despite the logistical challenges posed by the pandemic, the Chair ensured the continuity of the important intersessional roles of the committee and ably chaired the 5th OECPR, paving the way for the central adoption of urgent administrative and budgetary decisions, including medium-term strategy for 2020 to 2025. Mr. President, the online session of UNEA-5 is taking place as the world attempts to overcome and recover from a pandemic that has been claiming lives, reversing much of the development gains and reversing the progress made in several areas during the past decades. As highlighted by the UN Secretary General in his 2020 SDG report, 71 million people were expected to be pushed back into extreme poverty in 2020, the first rise of global poverty since 1998. The G77 plus China ministerial declaration adopted last November recalls that eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, remains the greatest global challenge and indispensable requirement for sustainable development. In this context, the G77 plus China recalls Principle 1 of the 1992 Rio Declaration, according to which human beings are at the center of the concerns of sustainable development, and express the conviction that in order to achieve a just balance among the economic, social, and environmental needs of present and future generations, it is necessary to promote harmony with nature for the very possibility of overcoming poverty, eradicating hunger, and achieving all other SDGs depends on a healthy environment. Mr. President, the United Nations Environment Assembly is the highest decision-making body on the environment, which champions the environmental dimension of the SDGs. We welcome that its fifth session will provide opportunities to reflect on how to build back better and accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda as we start the decade of action. We appreciate that despite the incidence of the COVID-19 pandemic, UNEA has not lost sight of its enormous responsibility to come together for the well-being of people and the planet, even if it is in a self-restrained and virtual format. While acknowledging the outcomes of the virtual process during the OECPR, the G77 plus China looks forward to the day when in-person meetings can resume and the Assembly can meet in the UNEP headquarters in Nairobi, further strengthening the only UN headquarters in the Global South as called for by paragraph 88 of the Rio plus 20 outcome document, the future we want. Mr. President, the digital divide is real. The G77 plus China Ministerial Declaration recalls that many developing countries lack affordable access to information and communication technologies. We therefore appreciate that UNEP indicated the possibility of covering costs for access to high-speed internet for least developing countries to connect to this online session of UNEA-5. We remain nonetheless concerned with the challenges
Not like a meeting.
we have the European Union and its member states. His Excellency, Mr. João Pedro Matos Fernandes, Minister of Environment and Climate Action of the Republic of Portugal. You have the floor.
Good morning to you all, Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, Your Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure and honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia, and Ukraine aligned themselves with this statement. Allow me to start by congratulating the UNEA presidency and the executive director of UNEP and commending all member states for standing firm and committed to the organization of this online session, despite the challenging times we are living in. The environment is more important than ever. As we gathered at this digital UNEA, the highest level of global environmental governance, we wish to convey a strong message to the global community on the urgency for decisive action to address the pressing challenges we are all facing today. Faced with one of the greatest challenges in generation, humankind's strength and resilience has been put to a test by the pandemic. We all suffer from it, with devastating health and socioeconomic consequences, as well as with environmental threats. But COVID-19 has also offered us the opportunity to revisit the fundamental role of nature and the environment and the need to strive for sustainability. This is our mission today and will be our mission for tomorrow. The world is undergoing changes that affect us all and to which more must provide sustainable, responsible, and global responses. More than ever before, it is urgent to work together for an inclusive economic and societal recovery from this global humanitarian crisis, one that takes us closer to a truly green and fair transition. UNEP report, Making Peace with Nature, is very clear. First, our current development model degrades the Earth's finite capacity to sustain human well-being. Second, so far, we have been unable to meet most of our commitments to limit environmental damage. And third, we need a clear break with current trends of environmental decline if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Distinguished colleagues, this online session of UNEA must be an example of how, with the right amount of political will and determination from us all, we can move things forward. UNEA-5 theme is timely indeed, strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This is not a slogan, it is a necessity. Nature cannot wait. Neither the rest of our pressing environmental and socio-economic challenges. Time is short and 2030 is around the corner. The EU and its member states welcome the decisions recommended for adoption by this Assembly. UNEP's groundbreaking medium-term strategy from 2022 to 2025 and the program of work and budget from 2022 to 2023 take a more holistic approach, and its design supports the Secretariat General's UN reforms process for enhanced delivery by the UN and the agenda, the 2030 agenda and its SDGs. It gives clear directions to tackle the environmental crisis with a focus on the need to address the main drivers, first and foremost, through much-needed transition to a more sustainable consumption and production development model. We stand ready to support this implementation. The EU and its member states further appreciate and support the efforts by the UNEA president to preserve a level of ambition that meets the urgent need to address specific goal challenges for the environment and human health, such as waste, chemicals, marine litter, and plastics. We shall continue our work, however, in the months to come. Crucial environmental summits are ahead of us, including the COPs for the 3 Rio Conventions. We have an enormous opportunity here to change things around for the better of our planet and accelerate the action on climate, biodiversity, land, chemicals and waste, and sustainable food systems. Moreover, we need a global agreement on plastic to tackle the ever-pressing problem of plastic pollution. It is our hope that we are able to join forces and launch these important negotiations at the resumed UNEA-5 session next year. The EU has embarked on a fundamental change of our economic model that addressed wasteful use of resources and puts nature at the center while strengthening our resilience. The European Green Deal and its rapid implementation with the recently adopted European strategies on circular economy, climate neutrality, biodiversity, food systems and chemicals, to mention a few, and the clear testimony of the EU determination and commitment. But we need everybody to join efforts in a global transition to a climate neutral, resource efficient, and circular economy, with a view to also continue to engage in enhanced international cooperation and strengthen global environmental governance. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank the UNEA president, our host country Kenya, and UNEP for launching the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of UNEP during this virtual session of UNEA-5. We look forward to collaborating in the intersessional period leading up to the resumed UNEA-5 to ensure a successful commemoration that honors the achievements of UNEP in the past 50 years. Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, this virtual session of the Environmental Assembly is only a beginning and a good start for what we must enact urgently in 2021 and the years to come in our action for nature. We are looking forward to the resumed in-person UNEA session in February next year to continue the hard work. The UNSG made it very clear in his address during the launch of UNEP reports, Making Peace with Nature, that 2021 is a make it or break it year for nature. So, with several upcoming important environmental COPs, followed by the resumed session of the UNEA in 2022, this is really a crucial year. Together, we must work to take action in the year to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, His Excellency Mr. Saleh bin Suleiman Al Houthi, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Sultanate of Oman, speaking on behalf of the Arab Group. You now have the floor.
شكرا سيد رئيس. سيد رئيس جمعية الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، السيدة إنجر أندرسون، المديرة التنفيذية لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، السيدة جويس مسويا، نائبة المديرة التنفيذية لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، أصحاب المعالي الوزراء، أصحاب السعادة السفراء، الممثلين الدائمين، السيدات والسادة، أسعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير. إنه لمن دواعي سروري أن أتوجه بكلمتي للجمعية الموقرة وكافة المشاركين فيها بمناسبة انعقاد الجزء الأول من الدورة الخامسة لجمعية الأمم المتحدة للبيئة بالإنابة عن المجموعة العربية. كما لا يفوتني أن أعبر عن شكري وتقديري الخالص لكافة الفاعلين الذين لم يدخروا جهدا لعقد هذه الدورة الافتراضية والعمل على إنجاحها. وأخص بالذكر كل من مكتب جمعية الأمم المتحدة للبيئة برئاستكم القديرة.
Distinguished representative,
any problem with the sound?
Please allow a second for the interpretation to come in. Just 1 minute. Can you start your statement now?
From the beginning?
From the beginning, a little slow, so that interpreters can pick it. Thank you.
Okay. From the beginning. السيد رئيس جمعية الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، السيدة المديرة التنفيذية لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، السيدة نائبة المديرة التنفيذية لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، أصحاب المعالي الوزراء، أصحاب السعادة السفراء، الممثلين الدائمين، السيدات والسادة، أسعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير. إنه لمن دواعي سروري أن أتوجه بالإنابة عن المجموعة العربية بكلمة هذه للجمعية الموقرة وكافة المشاركين فيها بمناسبة انعقاد الجزء الأول من الدورة الخامسة لجمعية الأمم المتحدة للبيئة. كما لا يفوتني أن أعبر عن شكري الخالص لكافة الفاعلين الذين لم يدخروا جهدا لعقد هذه الدورة الافتراضية والعمل على إنجاحها. وأخص بالذكر
Dans les mois à venir, il s'agit de renforcer nos ambitions et de créer des outils de gouvernance qui fixent des objectifs et des contrôles de mise en œuvre, notamment pour lutter contre la perte de biodiversité et pour assurer une bonne gestion des produits chimiques et des déchets dangereux. Je pense qu'il est grand temps de lancer des négociations en vue d'une convention sur les plastiques qui étouffent nos océans. Il est temps aussi de créer pour les produits chimiques et les déchets un organe scientifique similaire au GIEC, le groupe d'experts intergouvernemental sur l'évolution du climat. Enfin, il est temps d'élaborer des lignes directrices pour que l'exploitation des matières premières et la construction des infrastructures cessent de nuire à la nature et à la santé. L'année prochaine, nous aurons 2 rendez-vous importants. À nous de les saisir pour progresser encore. Il y aura d'abord le 50e anniversaire du Programme des Nations Unies pour l'environnement à Nairobi. Et puis, il y aura Stockholm plus 50 qui rappellera l'étape historique de la conférence sur l'environnement de 1972, celle qui déclara que chacun a le devoir solennel de protéger et d'améliorer l'environnement pour les générations présentes et futures. Nous avons pris et nous prenons encore des mesures drastiques pour lutter contre le coronavirus. Mettons la même énergie à transformer nos sociétés dans le sens de la durabilité. Le but est le même, sauver la vie.
Thank you very much. I remind you once again that if you do want to take the floor, please make a request so that we can close the speakers list. Meanwhile, I will now invite the delegation of Colombia to take the floor. Excellency, kindly remember to keep your statement under 2 minutes. Colombia, the floor is yours.
Distinguished Ambassador of Colombia, kindly, you seem to be connected. Kindly unmute yourself and deliver your statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope you're hearing me at this time. Good day to all of the distinguished ministers, ambassadors, and high commissioners, permanent representatives, representatives of the civil society, and of course to you, Mr. President, and all the UNEP team. Mr. President, Colombia wants to align itself with the statements made earlier by the distinguished ambassador of the Republic of Argentina and the High Commissioner of the Republic of Malawi on behalf of the GRULAC and G77 and China, respectively. Mr. President, at the outset, Colombia welcomes the positive outcomes of the virtual negotiations held during the OECPR. We will strongly support the full implementation of the medium-term strategy and the program of work and budget of the UNEP for the years ahead, and recognize the critical role that UNEP has to play as the global environmental authority in the challenging context of the pandemic. In this respect, Colombia wants to highlight the call for action adopted by the 22nd meeting of the Forum of Ministers of Environment of Latin America and the Caribbean on the environmental dimension of COVID-19 and the importance of a sustainable recovery. Mr. President, despite the well-known challenges imposed by virtuality, Colombia welcomes the flexibility and resilience of the program and the member states to facilitate fruitful negotiations. Considering the pandemic evolution and the host country's sanitary measures, we encourage UNEP to continue improving virtual negotiation platforms and remain committed to advancing the program work with virtual and hybrid formats before the resumed session of the Fifth Assembly in 2022. Finally, Mr. President, as the most diverse, biodiverse country per square meter, Colombia reaffirms its commitment with the adoption of an ambitious and effective post-2020 framework and the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have also announced Colombia's new mitigation target to reducing to 51% our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 to contribute to the implementation of the Paris Agreement. At the regional level, we are working tirelessly for the protection of the Amazon region and the Leticia Pact, and are also promoting the transition toward more renewable energies in Latin America and the Caribbean with the RELAC initiative. This to mention some of the efforts we are displaying to address the current environmental crisis, a crisis that will only be possible to solve acting together and articulating our work at the multilateral, region and local levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now invite the delegation of Jordan to take the floor. Please, Jordan, you have the floor.
My speech in behalf of Jordan government and Minister of Environment in Jordan. Mr. President, معالي وزير البيئة والمناخ النرويجي السيد دوردو فيتن رئيس الدورة الخامسة لجمعية الأمم المتحدة، معالي السيدة أندرسون المدير التنفيذي لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، نجتمع اليوم افتراضيا وفي ظرف استثنائي سببته جائحة كوفيد-19. هذا الوباء الذي عاد تعريف الكثير من الممارسات والأنماط المعيشية في العالم، وفرض تحديات هائلة على الاقتصاد والمجتمع وعلى إدارة الموارد الطبيعية، وكذلك على كيفية إدارة المؤسسات والتخطيط. في خضم هذه التأثيرات الهائلة على الصحة العامة والنشاط الاقتصادي العالمي، أثبت الوباء مرة أخرى أهمية الحرص على الاستدامة في العلاقة بين الإنسان والطبيعة، والتي يمكن أن تطلق الكثير من المخاطر الكامنة وغير المتوقعة في حال حدث مثل هذا الخلل في إدارة الموارد. السيد الرئيس، إن المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية وانطلاقا من بعد إنساني قد استضافت على مدار العقود السابقة الملايين اللاجئين الذين فتحت أبوابها لهم وما زالت مستمرة بموقفها الإنساني تجاههم، حيث تستضيف المملكة على أراضيها ما يقارب 3.5 مليون لاجئ، منهم 1,300,000 لاجئ سوري، وهذا يشكل ما نسبته 20% من سكان المملكة. ووفقا لخطة الاستجابة الأردنية للأزمة السورية لأعوام 2022، فإن المملكة تحتاج إلى ما يزيد عن 6 مليارات دولار لتتمكن من التعامل ومواجهة الآثار السلبية لهذه الأزمة على مختلف القطاعات، ومن ضمنها القطاع البيئي، حيث أن المساعدات الدولية المقدمة للأردن لا تغطي سوى 35% من مشاريع خطة الاستجابة. الأمر الذي دفع الحكومة إلى تخصيص جزء كبير من موازنتها السنوية للتغلب على هذه الأزمة. السيدات والسادة، السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، إن الأردن وعلى الرغم من التحديات الكبيرة التي يواجهها يعتبر من الدول السباقة التي لها دور قيادي ورائد على المستويين الإقليمي والدولي في مجال التنمية المستدامة، وتقوم بتبني الوسائل التي تساهم في تحقيقها، ومن أهمها التحول التدريجي والمدروس نحو الاقتصاد الأخضر، وتشجيع تطبيق مفاهيم ومبادرات التحول نحو أنماط الإنتاج والاستهلاك المستدامين، حيث تم في عام 2020 إطلاق الخطة التنفيذية للنمو الأخضر 2021-2025 لعدد من القطاعات الهامة مثل النفايات، الزراعة، النقل، المياه، السياحة والطاقة وكفاءة استخدامها، حيث تضمنت ما يقارب
de 2020 fuimos golpeados por dos fenómenos naturales hidrometeorológicos de alta intensidad, huracanes ETA y IOTA, dejándonos daños por el orden de los 738 millones de dólares que representan el 6.2% del Producto Interno Bruto. A pesar de lo anterior, nuestro país cuenta con 72 áreas protegidas, 7% de la diversidad mundial, 68 ecosistemas, 20.000 especies de flora y fauna y 4.7 millones de hectáreas de bosques que representan el 35% del territorio nacional, donde al menos el 50% de estos se encuentran gestionados en territorios indígenas. El gobierno de Nicaragua hace grandes esfuerzos para generar un desarrollo humano y combatir la pobreza, y es por ello por lo que desarrollamos un modelo de gestión pública basada en la democracia directa, la economía creativa y solidaria y el buen vivir en armonía con la madre tierra, lo cual es consistente
Mother Earth. which allow us to achieve the Agenda 2030 and Sustainable
Naciones
Development.
Unidas sobre el Cambio Climático, el Acuerdo de París y entre otros convenios de esfuerzos nacionales. Señor presidente, la actual pandemia del COVID-19 es una señal de creciente irrespeto del ser humano a los ecosistemas del planeta. Las enfermedades zoonóticas
Zoonotic diseases are emerging, and these have negative consequences of humans upon nature, and this accelerating the degradation of our ecosystem and our planet and woodlands. But also, President, the pandemic gives us an opportunity to change our models for development in terms of sustainable consumption and production, in terms of solidarity, to work together, which allow us to find symmetries between our people and to respect Mother Earth.
comunes es el camino para el bienestar y la calidad de vida de las generaciones actuales y futuras. Señor presidente, trabajando hacia un modelo de desarrollo sostenible, de cuidado, amor y respeto hacia la madre tierra, de la mano con nuestros protagonistas, grupos sociales, jóvenes, mujeres, familias, comunidades indígenas y rurales. Asimismo, instamos a la comunidad internacional a fortalecer la transición verde en países de desarrollo para una recuperación sostenible del COVID-19, incorporando la adaptación de los ecosistemas naturales con la mejor forma de crear resiliencia ante el cambio climático, la bioeconomía como fundamento para la sostenibilidad basada en ecosistemas naturales y la economía circular para preservar la utilidad y el valor de los materiales, reduciendo los niveles de contaminación. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much. As I said, the speakers list is now closed, and on my list I have Algeria, I have Tanzania, and I have Bangladesh. So first, I'll give the floor to Algeria and to Her Excellency the Minister, Dalila Boudjema, who I understand also is recently appointed. So congratulations on your appointment. Please, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi d'abord d'exprimer l'immense plaisir que j'ai à participer avec vous tous en ligne à cette 5e session de l'Assemblée des Nations Unies pour l'environnement. Je saisis l'occasion pour féliciter son Excellence, M. Sveinung, ministre norvégien de l'Environnement et du Climat, pour son élection à la présidence de cette honorable Assemblée. Je voudrais souhaiter également à Madame la directrice exécutive plein de succès dans sa mission, et je voudrais aussi vous assurer pleinement la disponibilité, notre disponibilité à œuvrer pour ensemble pour faire avancer la cause environnementale. Alors, l'Algérie, c'est résolument... Vous m'entendez?
Oui, Madame la Ministre, continuez.
Alors, l'Algérie s'est résolument engagée dans la voie du développement durable dans sa nouvelle constitution adoptée en novembre 2020 qui garantit un environnement sain à sa population et la préservation des ressources naturelles et des écosystèmes. L'intégration de ces principes même au sein du corpus de la loi fondamentale du pays constitue un engagement solennel à la mise en œuvre de politiques publiques efficaces garantissant un développement économique et social respectueux de l'environnement et de la nature. L'Algérie a intégré les objectifs du développement durable en tant que cadre de référence pour son développement national. Elle a pu atteindre avant terme certains de ces objectifs, notamment l'éradication de la pauvreté, l'accès à l'eau, l'éducation, la réduction de la mortalité infantile et maternelle et œuvre intensivement à la promotion d'un environnement durable. La restauration des écosystèmes est parmi nos priorités en Algérie. Nous nous sommes engagés dans le cadre de la proclamation de la décennie des Nations Unies pour la restauration des écosystèmes 2021-2030 à atténuer les facteurs directs de la dégradation des terres et des écosystèmes et à intégrer leur restauration dans les politiques, plans et programmes sectoriels. Outre sa constitution, l'engagement de l'Algérie pour le développement durable se traduit dans la loi 0310 de 2003 relative à la protection de l'environnement dans le cadre du développement durable, ainsi que dans la stratégie nationale pour l'environnement et le développement durable qui couvre presque l'intégralité des objectifs du développement durable. Cette stratégie se décline en 7 axes qui portent sur l'amélioration de la santé et de la qualité de vie, la préservation du capital naturel et culturel, le développement de l'économie verte et circulaire, l'augmentation de la résilience face à la désertification, l'amélioration de la résilience au changement climatique, la sécurité alimentaire et la gouvernance environnementale. L'exécution de cette stratégie et l'engagement que nous prenons en Algérie pour transformer et rationaliser progressivement nos modes de production et de consommation afin de préserver nos ressources naturelles, particulièrement dans ce contexte difficile post-Covid. Monsieur le Président, l'Algérie accueille avec satisfaction la proclamation de la décennie des Nations Unies pour la restauration des écosystèmes 2021-2030 par notre engagement à restaurer et consolider le barrage vert, une ceinture verte qui vise à stopper l'avancée du désert vers le nord, reliant les frontières algériennes d'est en ouest sur une longueur de 1500 km, à réhabiliter et à développer les espaces forestiers productifs et à conserver et à utiliser durablement la biodiversité et les écosystèmes terrestres et forestiers. Voilà, donc à cet égard, mon pays reste convaincu que l'éradication de ce genre de pandémie et l'atténuation de ses impacts est un défi majeur qui nécessite la mise en place d'un modèle de développement et de croissance économique, sociale, inclusif et équitable, protecteur des ressources naturelles et de l'environnement et soucieux de satisfaire les besoins des générations actuelles et futures, à travers la promotion des modèles de consommation et de production durable et d'une forte solidarité sur le plan sanitaire. Cette 5e session de l'Assemblée des Nations Unies pour l'environnement doit être l'occasion pour prendre des mesures ambitieuses pour reconstruire vert, en veillant à ce que la relance économique post-Covid-19 ne se fasse pas aux dépens de l'environnement et du développement durable. Il est de notre responsabilité collective de prendre des mesures décisives, équitables et courageuses pour un avenir durable que nous voulons tous pour les générations futures. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you very much. I will now invite the delegation of Tanzania to take the floor. Please, Tanzania, you have the floor.
His Excellency Lotevert, President of UNEA and the Minister of Environment and the Climate of Norway, Excellency Ms. Inga Anderson, Executive Director of the UNEP, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Almighty God for blessing us with good health that has enabled us to meet here today despite of the global pandemic. I feel honored for this privilege today to address this 5th UN Environmental Assembly, UNEA-5, on behalf of the government of the United Republic of Tanzania. We are indeed pleased to be part of this February 2021 Assembly through virtual convergence in the wake of the COVID-19. At this juncture, I wish to inform this Assembly that my delegation aligns itself with the African group as well as the G77 and the China statements. Mr. President, Tanzania shares the recognition that COVID-19 pandemic has put more pressure in the world socio-economic development and the efforts to achieve sustainable development and eradicate poverty as the world depends on its environments and the natural resources. Undoubtedly, this pandemic has put at stake our efforts to attain our desired conservation and the sustainable development goals. Tanzania is optimistic that we shall overcome this greater peril of our time. To this end, we recognize and appreciate all the individuals and the collective efforts undertaken by each member state to ensure that this pandemic is effectively addressed and the livelihood of our people and the economies are revived. In this context, we highly commend the ongoing initiative by UNEP and you, Mr. President, in particular, considering post-COVID-19 recovery measures as one of the agenda items for this meeting, which will also contribute to the meeting of the high-level political forum on sustainable development. Mr. President, as you may recall that the theme of UNEA-5, strengthening actions for nature to achieve the sustainable development goals, we as a global community are called to strengthen our actions to protect and restore nature and use nature-based solutions to achieve the sustainable development goals in its social, our desired conservation.
Amenaza nuestros esfuerzos para lograr la conservación y los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Tanzania es optimista que superaremos este gran peligro de nuestro tiempo. Para tal fin, reconocemos y apreciamos todos los esfuerzos individuales y colectivos emprendidos por cada país para asegurar que se haga frente a esta pandemia y que se revitalicen las economías y las subsistencias de nuestra gente. En este contexto, felicitamos encarecidamente las iniciativas en curso del PNUMA y de usted, señor presidente, en particular, para considerar las medidas de recuperación de la COVID-19 como uno de los puntos del programa para esta reunión, que contribuirán a las reuniones del Foro Político de Alto Nivel sobre el Desarrollo Sostenible. Señor presidente, como recordará, el tema de la UNEA-5, a reforzar acciones para la naturaleza, para lograr los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Nosotros, como comunidad mundial, debemos reforzar nuestras acciones para proteger y restaurar la naturaleza y el uso de las soluciones basadas en la naturaleza para lograr los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible en sus dimensiones social, económica y medioambiental para el año 2030. Tanzania reconoce la importancia de la diversidad biológica y sus beneficios que brinda al bienestar humano a nivel mundial y nacional. Tomamos nota de los progresos del CBD en cuanto a la preparación del marco de biodiversidad mundial post-2020. Hay que seguir protegiendo el medio ambiente con la aplicación de políticas, legislación, estrategias y planes nacionales y participación de actores no estatales en la conservación de biodiversidad y su gestión, la conservación y la designación de nuevas áreas protegidas. El gobierno pronto iniciará su examen de su estrategia y plan de acción para la biodiversidad conforme al marco mundial 2020 y la comunidad internacional para apoyar la aplicación de la estrategia. Señor presidente, en cuanto a los esfuerzos para reducir el impacto del cambio climático, el país ha tomado las medidas para hacer frente a los retos asociados con el cambio climático en el marco del Acuerdo de París.
Ejecutamos proyectos para intentar lidiar con las incidencias en varios ámbitos. Además, el Gobierno ha establecido un centro de vigilancia de emisiones de carbono que, entre otros objetivos, aspira a desarrollar y mantener bases de datos de diferentes países sobre el carbono. Además, forma parte de una red y está contribuyendo a fortalecer la eficiencia y la eficacia del transporte en el sector energético. Aspira a reducir las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero y a mejorar nuestras capacidades para enfrentarnos a las consecuencias del cambio climático y dotar de mayor resiliencia a nuestro país. Antes de concluir, señor presidente, me gustaría recordar a los delegados presentes que el 4 de diciembre del año pasado se reunió en línea la Conferencia Ministerial Africana sobre el Medio Ambiente. En ella, los ministros renovaron su sentido de compromiso para mejorar la resiliencia de los recursos naturales en África y de la resiliencia del continente en la lucha contra la pandemia de COVID-19. Tanzania respaldó la declaración del AMCEN para con la ejecución del programa en el contexto de la recuperación a raíz de la pandemia de COVID-19 y para fortalecer la resiliencia del continente ante crisis futuras. A pesar de los desafíos de gran envergadura, hacemos todo lo posible, pese a lo cual solicitamos la asistencia técnica y financiera de nuestros asociados para el desarrollo para poder poner en marcha ese y otros programas. Me gustaría hacer hincapié en
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. I have the distinct honor to provide you with a report on the work of the Committee of Permanent Representatives since the fourth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, as well as on the outcomes of the fifth meeting of the open-ended Committee of Permanent Representatives held virtually from 15 to 17 February 2021. The content of this oral report is reflected in writing in the document UNEP/EA4/INF/2 entitled, and I quote, Report on the Work of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, end of quote, and in document OACPR/5/3 entitled, and I quote, Draft Chair's Summary of the Fifth Meeting of the Open-Ended Committee of Permanent Representatives, end of quote. They have been made available on the OACPR-5 and UNEA-5 meeting websites, respectively. Mr. President, Excellencies, since UNEA-4, the committee has convened 8 regular meetings covering a very wide range of topics, such as the follow-up of the many outcomes of UNEA-4, the process mandated by General Assembly Resolution 73/333, the preparations towards an action plan to implement paragraph 88 of the Future We Want, the preparations for the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the creation of the United Nations Environment Programme, and presentations of UNEP flagship reports. We have also convened twice in the format of the annual subcommittee of the Committee of Permanent Representatives in October 2019 and October 2020 to perform review and oversight of the implementation of the current program of work and undertake consultations on the preparation of a new medium-term strategy for 2022-2025 and a program of work and budget for 2022-2023. We have also discussed the review of our internal structures and working methods under the known as process for review by the CPR, among other issues. Moreover, the committee has, on average, met once or twice a month under the format of a subcommittee to advance the consideration of all these important matters. Finally, it is my pleasure to announce that we successfully concluded the online segment of the fifth meeting of the open-ended meeting of the Committee of Permanent Representatives last week. In doing so, we took note of the official reports of the Executive Director to UNEA-5, and following the constructive engagement of all delegations, despite the many challenges associated with holding virtual meetings and technical difficulties faced, agreed to recommend the following three draft decisions for adoption by this Assembly. First, UNEP/EA5/L2, Management of Trust Funds and Earmarked Contributions. UNEP/EA5/L3, Medium-Term Strategy for 2022-2025 and Program of Work and Budget for the biennium 2022-2023. And UNEP/EA5/L4, Adjournment and Resumption of the fifth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. In addition, the committee heard a briefing from yourself, Mr. President, regarding the consultations on your proposal for a possible consensual message from the online session of UNEA-5. The committee took note with appreciation of your intention to put forward the proposed message for final consideration and possible endorsement by this Assembly, with the understanding that it does not constitute a negotiated outcome of UNEA-5 and shall not set a precedent for future meetings. Further information about the fifth meeting of the open-ended meeting of the Committee of Permanent Representatives is available in the draft chair's
real as well as virtual meeting rooms, background documents, interpretation, expertise, logistic support, legal advice, and screen editing. Before I conclude, Mr. President, I also wish to express my sincere gratitude to the former chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, and until a few weeks ago, its rapporteur, Her Excellency Madam Francisca Ashiete Odunton, former High Commissioner and Permanent Representative of Ghana, who led the committee until June 2019. I thank her for the transparency, camaraderie, and diligent leadership. With that said, Mr. President, I hereby formally submit the Chair's summary of the 5th Open-Ended Committee of Permanent Representatives to the 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly for its consideration. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your succinct report. I would also like to take this opportunity to invite the Assembly to celebrate the achievements made by the committee under the able leadership of Ambassador Coimbra and his predecessor, High Commissioner Ashiete Odunton, and their Bureau members. Now, does the Assembly wish to take note of the report? I see no objections. It is so decided. That concludes consideration of the report of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. Moving on to agenda item number 12, adoption of the resolutions, decisions, and outcome document of the session. I will now invite the Assembly to consider and adopt proposed decisions brought forth to the Assembly from the 5th meeting of the Open-Ended Committee of Permanent Representatives as part of agenda item 12, adoption of the resolutions, decisions, and outcome document of the session. Delegations wishing to make a statement in connection with these decisions will be invited to do so after the adoption by the Assembly. The first proposed decision is UNEP-EA5-L2, Management of Trust Funds and Earmarked Contributions. Does the Assembly wish to adopt decision UNEP-EA5-L2? I see no objections. It is so decided. I now announce the decision on the management of trust funds and earmarked contributions adopted. The next draft decision is UNEP-EA5-L3, Medium-Term Strategy for 2022 to 2025, and Program of Work and Budget for the Biennium 2022-2023. Does the Assembly wish to adopt decision UNEP-EA5-L3? I see no objections. It is so decided. I now announce the decision on medium-term strategy for 2022 to 2025 and program of work and budget for the biennium 2022 to 2023 is adopted. The last decision is UNEP-EA5-L4, adjournment and resumption of the 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Does the Assembly wish to adopt decision UNEP-EA5-L4? I see no objections. It is so decided. The decision on adjournment and resumption of the 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly is adopted. Does any delegation wish to make a statement in connection with any of the 3 decisions that the Assembly has adopted?
No, President, there are no requests for the floor.
No requests for the floor. Well then, Excellencies, before adjourning this meeting, I wish to remind you that there are 2 opportunities to engage in leadership dialogues. The first one, just 2 seconds. Before I continue with adjourning the meeting and some information, I will ask Ms. Inger Anderson if she wishes to make a statement at this moment. Please, Inger, you have the floor.
Distinguished Executive Director, perhaps you're muted. No additional remarks from the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Now, Excellencies, as I said before adjourning this meeting, I wish to remind you that there are 2 opportunities to engage in leadership dialogues. The first one being this afternoon from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Nairobi time. The second one being tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. again Nairobi time. The leadership dialogues are an opportunity for high-level discussions on the contribution of the environmental dimension of sustainable development to building a resilient and inclusive post-pandemic world. I encourage you to participate and listen in on these dialogues as we share experiences. Now, let me ask at this point the Secretariat if you have any housekeeping items or anything else that needs to be announced, then you have the opportunity to do so now.
Thank you, distinguished President, and to thank you for your able leadership. The only request that I have is for delegations that will participate in the first leadership dialogue to connect promptly to the link that has been made available to the participants of the dialogue, and ensure that your interventions in the dialogue are very short, under absolutely 3 minutes, because we have a very high amount of interest from ministers and high-level representatives to participate in our dialogue. So in order to be able to be as efficient as we have been today, we will trust on the leadership of representatives to ensure that their remarks are under 3 minutes in any case during the dialogue. For the rest of the participants and delegations, stakeholders, and citizens interested in the work of this assembly, we have provided links, open links, from which you can follow the leadership dialogues and engage with the high-level representatives discussing these important topics. So that would be the only housekeeping announcement that I have. The plenary will reconvene tomorrow at 11 a.m. Nairobi time, promptly for its wrap-up session. So I hand the floor back to you, distinguished. At 2 o'clock, yes, we will have a leadership dialogue at 11, and then the plenary will reconvene at 4 o'clock. The floor back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to thank all participants for your cooperation today, which has made that we have now successfully made the decisions that were on our agenda, and we are able to also finish the meeting ahead of time. So that is excellent. Thank you very much for your cooperation. With that said, I now declare this meeting adjourned until the afternoon of Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021 at 4 p.m. Nairobi time. Thank you all.